All right, welcome everybody to today's Sonoma County Transportation Authority and Regional Climate Protection Authority. You good? Okay. All right, sounds good. On that note, Drew, can you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, directors. We'll start with Director Melanie Bagby, who we are told is on her way. Director Janice Cater-Thompson also informed me that she will not be here today. Director Chris Corsi.
I'm here.
Director Gerard Giudice.
Here.
Director Susan Harvey.
Here.
Director Nisa Hinton.
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Hopkins.
I am present but remote, and it is under the just cause exemption. I came down with a bad cold late last week, and I'm still coughing, and also actually have an 8-year-old sick at home from school as well. So I think that there might be something that Chris or Suzanne needs to read into the record, but I wanted to share the just cause at my remote presence.
All right, thank you. Director Errol Kelly, we were told, is on her way as well. Director Sandra Lowe.
Here.
Director David Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
And Chair Chris Rogers.
Here. All right, Suzanne, I think you're up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do need to read this item for just cause absence. Director Hopkins notified us that she would be unable to attend remotely pursuant to AB 2449, which allows up to 2 virtual attendances per calendar year for just cause. The circumstances for the just cause for today's teleconference participation is she has a childcare and has a cold. And because of this, it is just cause and no vote is needed by the board, but she is limited to 2 per year. Everyone's limited to 2 per year.
All right. Well, we're glad you could still join us, Director, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person when you can join us, hopefully next month. Let's move on to public comment for items not on the regular agenda. If you're here for a public comment, go ahead and approach the podium. Mr. DeWitt. Good to see you, sir.
Hi, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland and also from the Sonoma County Housing Advocacy Group, which was formed after the Sonoma Marin area where multimodal transportation study was submitted in the mid-90s by Peter Calthorpe. In that study, he talked about something that's become dear to my heart. The topic today is Todd fraud. A Todd fraud is not an individual person named Todd. It's an acronym on the back of your agenda today, transit-oriented development. That study from back in the mid-90s pointed out that that was an effort was going to be undertaken here in Sonoma County. One of the dilemmas, though, is that initiatives that are taken and incentives given are frequently not followed up on. As a matter of fact, I talked to an employee of this agency once about this, and he said he didn't know if there'd been any auditing of any of the projects that got benefits for transit-oriented development. Now, I live in a neighborhood where daily big empty buses come by. I like buses. I ride them all over. I got my bus map from Alameda County from 20 years ago. I got my bicycle map from Santa Rosa from 20 years ago. I ride bikes, ride buses, try to do that transit type of thing. The dilemma that we face, though, is that many developers are coming to this body and other bodies to get incentives saying they're going to build transit-oriented development. They then get it, and nobody verifies whether or not the residents of those residential projects even use the buses or the transit. Okay? What is done is they say, well, there's a bus stop within a 1/4 mile walk. So they get the incentive. They go ahead and they build. In our neighborhoods over in Roseland, hundreds of new cars come in with every new development. And people drive 2 and 3, sometimes 4 and 5 cars per residential unit. And they don't use the buses. The buses are empty. I ride the bus a lot and I don't see folks on there. I brought a couple of things you could reference in the future that might help you. One's from Amsterdam. They've been doing transit-oriented development for 40 years. This is called Nieuwe Sloten. It's a garden city approach to getting transit-oriented development. This is the municipal plan for Copenhagen, Denmark from a dozen years ago. They put this out all the time so that their residents can see how they really do transit-oriented development. Can't see it so well, but that's a 6-story building and the people there ride bikes and ride buses. So I'm all for getting big buildings in downtown Santa Rosa and really following up on it. And you folks following up to make sure there's an audit that every project that gets incentives for transit-oriented development actually provides people who use transit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Are there any other comments here in the room? Seeing none. Drew, any on Zoom?
I'm currently seeing no members of the public on Zoom wishing to speak on items 3.
All right. Madam Executive Director, do you want to go on to our consent calendar?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have several SCTA, RCPA concurrent items, the minutes from the prior meeting, Form 700 notification, which is not an action item, just a reminder that it's that time of year to fill out the Form 700s for this body, as well as your directly elected forms. We have our audit services agreement extension, as well as some RCPA items related to the water upgrade save program and a comment letter on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's NOx rule that is submitting a letter of support to the Air District for those proposed regulations. And then the consent items for the SCTA include resolutions of local support for Hearn Avenue Interchange and the Safe Routes to School program. This is a requirement for funding, and a report out on our Measure M's bond program. So those are the consent items today, Mr. Chair.
Great. I'll look to the board to see if there's any questions on the consent calendar. Vice Chair, are you good? All right, let's go to public comment then on today's consent calendar. Mr. DeWitt.
Hello, sir. Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Item 4.5. As a respiratory therapist, I understand some of the underlying dynamic behind this approach, but I don't believe it's actually going to be able to have much influence. Most people that utilize any type of water heating equipment and other types of heating equipment want to have the full range of what might be available in our system here in the United States. This type of approach of trying to restrict which products are available and limiting the opportunity for the public to buy what they'd like seems too heavy-handed. On the funding under SCTA, I'm very glad that Hearn Avenue has risen to the top and may get some funding this year. Been following it for 22 years, and it's really important that it gets done sometime within the next 22 years if possible. The citywide and countywide safe routes to school projects, they're not doing as well as they could. I'm sure that you get presentations by members of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, and they might say, yeah, this is a great situation. But what's happening over in Roseland is people drive their kids to school. And there's a fear apparently within the community that children aren't safe to walk or ride their bikes to school. So over there on 4 streets within the main part of Roseland, running from the north to the south, twice a day, morning, afternoon, the streets are packed with people waiting in line, idling to pick up kids rather than have them walk or ride their bicycle. It's something that I believe won't change no matter how much you put forward on this safe routes to school approach. I like the people who are involved in that project. I like the Bicycle Coalition, used to be on the county's Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. I believe in that stuff, but the real life situation is that parents don't believe their kids are safe. So they're driving them to school. So you ought to really look at this and say, well, you know, the funding for this whole situation, maybe it ought to be better directed towards educating parents not to drive their SUVs to school. Think about it for a moment. You're willing to intervene on how people might buy gas heating and water heating appliances. So why not get in there and start looking at how you could have people adjust their travel mode? That's what you're supposed to do. So it wouldn't be overbearing, I think, to approach all those parents that rev up their cars twice a day, every day, 5 days a week, all throughout the school year, and sit outside those schools idling away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Are there any other comments in the room? Any on Zoom?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Yeah. We have a motion from Healdsburg,
Second.
second from Cloverdale. Any additional discussion? All right, Drew, please call the vote.
Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Yes.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye,
Let me see that motion passing.
great. Let's go on to item 5.1, please. Welcome, Tanya.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. Can everybody see the?
Yeah.
All right, great, thank you. So I'm here today to give you a brief update on an application that the RCPA is working on in partnership with the Latino service providers. We're trying out our new setup here, so. Set?
Looks good.
Is it advancing on your screen? No. No. Oh, there we go. All right. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background to share how it is that our CPA and Latino service providers have been working together over time. Back in 2020, there was a group that was connected with the MAP 1 Sonoma County initiative. That was an effort that grew out of the 2017 wildfires to look at ways that as a community we could become more resilient in a variety of different systems. And so there was a workshop that was designed and led by Latino leaders that really explored Latino leader involvement in climate change. And a report was published from that workshop by Sonoma State University called Elevating Latino Voices to Heal Our Community from Climate Impacts. And one of the outgrowths of that report was the formation of this group that now calls itself Latino Leaders on Climate Change. And the RCPA was invited to participate in some of the early meetings of that group to basically figure out how to take the recommendations from this report and move them forward in the community. So in addition to Latino service providers and the RCPA participating in this group, we've also had representation from the Sonoma County Climate Action and Resiliency Division, CHOPS Teen Club, Pepperwood Preserve, Sonoma Clean Power, and Saluna Outreach Solutions. And so since that original workshop in 2020, the group has organized 2 educational summits, one of which you see here on the screen that was offered last April around Earth Day. And we are also working together to organize a resource fair focused on climate solutions and resources at the Latino Family Educational Summit at Sonoma State University on April 15th. So we continue to work together on public education and outreach. And then most recently, we worked with Latino service providers, Daily Acts, and a number of other community partners on a larger grant application to the Strategic Growth Council's Regional Climate Collaboratives Program, which you may recall from previous updates to the board. Unfortunately, we were not selected for an award under that grant, but we did get some really strong positive feedback about one of the programs that was included for funding in the grant, which was Latino Service Providers Youth Promotores Verdes program. So with that feedback and understanding that there's new grants coming up, new opportunities coming up, we are now looking at the Office of Planning and Research Adaptation Planning Grant program to submit a new application focused on the Latino Service Providers program and our funding for climate outreach. So just a few words about the Latino service providers and their Youth Promotores Verdes program. This is a one-year program for bilingual youth, ages 16 to 25. And it provides environmental education and climate environmental information to the youth. And they then take that information out into their community. They host workshops, they appear at public events, and really share that information with their community to raise awareness about climate change as well as mental health and well-being. And the goal of the program is to increase the number of Latinx community members who are equipped with the information and resources to take proactive steps to address climate change. Now, I'd like to note that the Youth Promotores program has other tracks in addition to the Verdes program, which is focused on climate change and the environment. They also have a mental health program, emergency preparedness, and housing. And so youth are focusing on these different areas based on their interests. And so one of the nice things about this grant that we're working on is that even though we're targeting the funding towards the Promotores Verdes program, they actually provide this education on the climate aspect of the youth program to all of their tracks. So it's a way of not just providing the education to those youth who are interested in climate, the youth who are participating in the other tracks will receive this information as well. And the photo on the slide is from Youth Promotores Verdes presentation at Pepperwood Preserve last April during the summit that I mentioned. So now just a few words on the grant program that we're applying for. This is through the Office of Planning and Research at the state level, and it is the Adaptation Planning Grant Program that we're specifically focused on applying for. This is a program that starts in this fiscal year. There will be 3 rounds of the program with a total of $6.6 million of funding in each round, and the awards range from $150,000 to $650,000. By comparison, that Regional Climate Collaboratives grant that I mentioned, the top award there was close to $2 million. So you can see this is a smaller grant program, but we still feel like it's worthwhile applying for. The other 2 that you see here on the screen are not yet accepting applications, but RCPA will definitely be tracking the Regional Resilience Planning Grant as well as the Extreme Heat Grant and determining if it makes sense for us to apply or encourage other folks to apply for those grants. So in terms of the proposal itself, it has 2 main elements, and the title of our project is Elevating Latinx Voices in Climate Change Planning. And so a piece of the funding would go towards expanding the Youth Promotores Verdes program, essentially enabling Latino service providers to increase the number of youth that are participating in that program. And RCPA would also work with Latino service providers to integrate the adaptation climate planning into the curriculum, basically taking the plans that have already been done by the various jurisdictions and making sure that the youth have access to those and have an understanding of what's in those planning documents. And then to partner with LSP or Latino service providers and the Youth Promotores Verdes on the community outreach and engagement that they're already doing, but also working with Latino service providers community engagement team to do additional outreach related to our climate funding measure. And then second, we would take the inputs that we're gathering from the Youth Promotores Verdes, as well as the additional outreach that we would do, and integrate that into the recommendations that would be coming to all of you from our Funding for Climate program committees. And in terms of the timeline, so I mentioned earlier that applications are due on March 31st. We anticipate, or OPR anticipates, noticing of recommendations for that round 1 awards in the May-June timeframe, with the project funding to be available in June. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to the chair for any questions or comments from the board.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanya. Director Corsi.
Thanks, Tanya. Could you talk a little bit about how the mental health side of this fits in with the climate action?
Sure. So Latino Service Providers has done at least 1 survey that I'm aware of youth, and really understanding their mental health, that they're feeling the impacts to their mental health from the various disasters that we've had, that they're seeing a very direct impact on their community. So they're seeing a clear connection between the climate change impacts that we're already starting to feel in the community and the mental health of the youth that are working in their program. They also have a specific track that's looking at, for example, addressing teen suicide and other mental health challenges that teens are facing. And so the youth have an opportunity to choose which track they want to focus on. And so while there's overlap, there's also opportunities for them youth to focus in different areas.
Thank you.
Director Giudice.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the nice report. Appreciate it. In the second paragraph, it says that the grant leverages $25 million to fund local, regional, and tribal communities in integrated climate adaptation planning. is it incumbent upon those tribal communities to initiate the grant themselves? Or could that be part of what we're doing?
It could be part if we had a partner. So the way we're applying for this grant is we're the main applicant and LSP is our co-applicant. So we haven't approached the tribes to see if they would be interested in partnering. I don't know if other folks in the county are planning to apply for this grant, but the tribes could choose to apply themselves or could partner with others. So.
Okay, thank you.
Director Kelly?
Can you talk a little bit about the scope geographically around the program?
Yes, so the scope is countywide. And so we, as part of our application, we are identifying the areas of the community across Sonoma County that are either designated as official disadvantaged or impacted communities through the various definitions that we have, but recognizing that the LSP youth come from across the county. So we're really looking at this as a great opportunity to work not just in Santa Rosa, but hopefully beyond, depending on the youth that enroll in the program.
Any other questions from the board? All right, thank you so much, Tanya. Let's go to public comment. If you'd like to provide comment in the room, go ahead and approach the podium. All right, seeing none. Drew, any on Zoom?
Currently not seeing any members of the public on Zoom wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and bring it back and look for a motion from the board. And we've got action on this one.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I don't think there is any action required at this time. Yeah, I think 5.1 says action, but I don't think it actually requires.
Perfect.
So apologies for that.
Yeah. Action was taken care of then.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tanya. Let's move on to item 5.2 then, which is a report item. Welcome up, Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. I'd like to provide a brief update on RCPA's Climate Protection Initiative activity. Oh, thanks, Drew. So the name of the overall effort has been changed based on member suggestions and steering committee feedback. That name is the Climate Protection Initiative. If a future ballot measure is recommended, the final name will likely differ when it's presented to the public. Program committee meetings began in February with virtual sessions on the transportation, buildings, inland and water committees. Meeting attendance has varied between the three sectors, but discussion and feedback from community members has started very strong. And here we see the timeline for the Climate Protection Initiative going forward into June, where staff will present draft project lists and polling recommendations to the board. Additional outreach at upcoming tabling events will focus on bringing additional members of the public to the committee meetings. Upcoming events include Earth Day programs in Santa Rosa and Healdsburg, as well as the Environmental Resource Fair at the Latino Family Education Summit. All will be held in April. And RCPA staff will also coordinate with Climate Protection Initiative leads to host a virtual community workshop on April 19th at 6 p.m. to provide a public update on the process and generate interest for the effort going forward. Live Spanish interpretation will be provided, and the event should fit in nicely with the aforementioned Earth Day, Earth Week activities. And that is actually the extent of the presentation for now. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding the Climate Protection Initiative update.
All right, let's look to the board for any questions. Director Corsi.
Ross, can you just talk about how members of these various committees are recruited or might be able to get involved if they'd like to?
That's a great question. Thank you. So we've been sending communications to our list, both RCPA and then a separate climate list that we kind of solicited from various climate leaders. So been sending out messages. There's been a little bit of social media. We had in December a community meeting at Sonoma Clean Power Advanced Energy Center where we signed people up. And currently there's a Google form you can sign up. You can also get on the mailing list. That's all on the RCPA site. But that's really the purpose of this community workshop. And then before each meeting, we've actually been broadcasting out a message to all of our climate contacts, just really imploring people if they want their voice heard to join a committee.
Members of this board or the RCPA advisory group eligible to be members of these committees?
I know that there's some Brown Act questions there. Basically, these committees will be making recommendations to you or to the steering committee and then to the board itself. So you will certainly have an opportunity. You could watch as a member of the public, but communication could create Brown Act issues,
Sure.
I believe.
And these meetings are broadcast to the public, zoomed to the public.
They are.
Where's that information available?
That is all on the RCPA website. There's a mention right on the homepage, and then if you see Climate Protection Initiative, under what we do, you can sign up, and we've been putting all the information in one place. Previous meeting recordings, transcripts, and chat logs.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? All right, let's see if there's any public comment. Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I'm a California State Respiratory Care practitioner. I've been following Earth Day since it began. And I've been looking into these ideas about our climate protection approaches. So much so that I have to ask you folks, are you going to try to have some sort of a tax? Because it said a ballot initiative. Whenever I hear that, it makes me think that we're not necessarily solving a problem that we're facing. Governmental agencies are looking for funding to spend on something that they feel is important to them or the bureaucracies that they work with. Jurisdictional agencies frequently have an approach of finding funds for problems that may not be solvable in our area. And that's something important to keep in mind. I live in an area that has a lot of wind coming from the ocean. We also have a lot of pollution up on Sebastopol Road. We have the highest rate of childhood asthma in Sonoma County in the Roseland area. And yet, I actually believe this isn't going to be something that helps those types of issues. I'm really curious as to what this protection initiative will undertake. I see that some of the members are bicyclists. I like those folks. I ride my bike when it's okay. It's not as safe as it used to be around here anymore, though. Anyway, long story short, could you please explain today if you're going to be trying to do a ballot initiative to look for taxpayers' money to do some kind of a thing? And if that's the case, tell us what it is you're going to be trying to do. That wasn't explained in today's presentation. It would be very helpful to hear what that's about. Oh, and you know, climate leaders. I don't know if I'm considered a climate leader. I've been spending a lot of time studying all this stuff, though. Got some master's degrees in these kinds of things. How do you become a climate leader here locally? Does that mean you got to go along to get along? You got to be on somebody's list? Or how do I get noticed that I like paying attention to this stuff? Thank you kindly for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Do we have any other public comments in the room? Drew, any on Zoom?
Currently don't see any members on Zoom wishing to speak on that. I'm sure others.
All right, I'll bring it back. And I do believe the question about how to become a climate leader, you are more than welcome to join any of the committees, to be there for participation and for discussion. And Madam Executive Director, are there other ways that folks can participate?
Thank you for the invitation, sir. I'll be there.
Great. Yeah, people can participate via Zoom. We will try and have hybrid meetings, and it is not an exclusive group. We welcome all residents of county and beyond.
Great. Let's move on then to, unless there's any other comments from directors, let's move on to item 5.3.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors of the board. The item before you is regarding a contract with Trillium Solutions for transit website design and development. With this item, I would like to provide some background on the transit integration project under which this work falls, and discuss some recent progress that's been made. All right. So I'll be providing some background on the transit integration work, an overview of the project that SCTA is managing and how this fits in with regional collaboration. And finally, discuss the website integration work and action that's before you today. So here's a high-level picture of the transit network in Sonoma County. Santa Rosa City Bus provides local transit in Santa Rosa. Petaluma Transit provides local transit in Petaluma. Sonoma County Transit provides local transit in all other cities and the unincorporated areas and between cities. And then regional transit is provided by Golden Gate Transit and SMART. Efforts to integrate transit operations have a long history. In 2012, MTC completed the Transit Sustainability Project, which included a recommendation for operators in Sonoma County to pursue functional and institutional consolidation. And in 2019, SCTA, in collaboration with Sonoma County Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, Petaluma Transit, and MTC, completed the Transit Integration and Efficiency Study. The purpose of this study was to identify actions that, through collaboration with the 3 local operators, would improve the rider experience, increase efficiency of delivering service, reduce operating and capital costs, and eventually enable improved service. In 2020 and 2021, in response to pandemic-related challenges for transit throughout the Bay Area, MTC created the Blue Ribbon Transit Task Force. This effort was to recognize critical recovery challenges facing public transit, advance equity, identify actions to implement network management and governance reforms, and to advance transit initiatives and integrate these reforms. So in fall 2020, alongside the regional efforts to address pandemic challenges for transit, the SCTA convened the Future of Transit Ad Hoc Committee to prioritize recommendations that were identified in the Transit Integration and Efficiency Study, and to coordinate and implement the regional Blue Ribbon Task Force goals. I'm going to go back, sorry. So the ad hoc identified 2 primary goals: to increase transit ridership and simplify and enhance the transit customer service experience. In 2021, the MTC Blue Ribbon Transit Task Force granted SCTA funding to further advance the local transit integration work that we had been doing. So pre-pandemic, the 3 local bus operators provided over 3,000 rides per year. And as with all transit agencies, the pandemic had a huge impact on ridership, but we have been seeing a steady and increasing recovery, moving toward closer to pre-pandemic levels. So the transit integration work includes 4 main objectives: integrated transit service planning for more efficient operations, integrated customer service to improve the customer experience, integrated fares and fare programs to support interoperator travel, communication, and marketing, and integrated information and marketing to expand reach and improve the user experience. We have quite a bit of work ahead, but there's already been a number of successes. The operators have established a paratransit 1-seat ride pilot program to reduce the need to transfer between operators, and have established synchronized schedule change dates. Sonoma County Transit established a new customer service phone number that provides options to connect to any of the 3 transit agencies, and now that's being presented on all of the transit operators' information. And they have established a system for cross-training customer service throughout the 3 agencies. The operators have established common fare-free days, and they were applied for and were awarded a joint grant to fund fare-free youth for 2 years. And they are all participating in the Clipper Start Reduced Fare program. And finally, we have kicked off the integrated transit service planning effort. and that contract came to this board last month. So the transit integration work ties in with regional collaboration led by MTC on transit mapping and wayfinding. This regional project includes developing a regional transit brand to connect and complement the existing transit brands and establishing unified standards for transit wayfinding region-wide. And because of the work that we have done on transit integration locally, Sonoma County was selected as one of the sub-regional pilots to test these standards and in preparation for a later phase, which will include a full implementation throughout the region. So the pilot will create consistent user-focused transit branding and touch points throughout Sonoma County, and we'll rebrand the services to one common brand for the 3 local bus operators. So the work we're doing right now and locally will prepare the local bus operators to implement this pilot program. So the next step in our local process is website integration. And this is part of the customer service front. As I mentioned earlier, there's now a single phone line that customers can call and be transferred to any of the 3 agencies. And we are now proposing to hire a website designer to do design review and website development for transit. Future customer service items tasks include integration of the design and implementation of the bus stop signage, signage at transit centers and real-time information, and developing consistent policies and procedures for public information and interaction. So this is a snapshot of the current websites for the 3 transit operators. Each have a different look and feel, but the Sonoma County Transit and Petaluma Transit are currently both using the Trillium website platforms. And so there are some functionalities that are the same, but the layouts are very different. And Santa Rosa City Bus is using the city standard website for transit. So this is an example of what integrated branding for websites could look like for the 3 transit agencies. So this example, there are shows 3 different transit operators websites that have a similar design and feel and a single landing page. And so this is kind of the an example of the effort that we are moving toward. So there we go. The proposed contract with Trillium is the first step in moving toward a single website landing page for Sonoma County bus transit information. And it includes a design review and development of consistent design mockups for Sonoma County Transit and Petaluma Transit websites. And then with that design, it would be development of a new website for Santa Rosa City Bus that's consistent with that agreed upon design for the 3 bus operators. And then once all 3 websites are on the Trillium platform, we would then request some quotes and scopes of work to implement the consistent design elements for both Sonoma County Transit and Petaluma Transit websites. And then develop a single multi-agency landing page for all 3 websites. So the action before you today is to authorize the executive director to finalize and execute the agreement with Trillium Solutions for the initial phases of website integration. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And I'll be the first to say Santa Rosa's website is not particularly functional across the board. And so I'm really excited to see integration with our other transit networks so that it's a usable system for folks. And I know we've been working spending a lot of time working on the TIE study and trying to implement it. So I want to give a quick shout out to Rachel Eid from our team, as well as our entire partners, Petaluma Transit, Sonoma County Transit, Brian Albee, and others. Questions from directors? Director Giudice?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It's excellent and I'm in full support of this. It says here that you're looking to extend integrated activities with the regional transit operators like Smart Mobility Transit. When we launch this initial website, can we accomplish part of that by having a landing page immediately at that website? Is that part of the plan to have a landing page for those agencies?
Yeah, so that's a future step. So this
Okay.
contract would initially, this contract that's before you today would set the groundwork for that landing page. We want to have all three transit operators be on the same platform and have the consistent design, and then develop that landing page and start directing people to that landing page.
And then I just had a passing thought that I'd like to share. You know, all of us, some of us get in our cars all the time and we have a little app, there's a map, right? And where are you and where do you want to go? Wouldn't it be really cool to develop some kind of an application where a transit user can just like tap on that application and go anywhere in the Bay Area? And there's a route, is there an application for that?
It's called transit.
Oh, I gotta get that. Perfect. Thank you. Never mind.
Google.
Transit.
Director Rabbit?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Janet, for the presentation. Appreciate that. I was a member of the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force. It was timely because of the pandemic to look at the Bay Area's. Bay Area has 27 different transit agencies, which is unique, to say the least. And it's not unlike here in Sonoma County, where we have so many different, whether they are fire service providers, school districts, and you know how often we go into is this really the most efficient way to carry out this service? Well, in this case, the Transit Recovery or the Blue Ribbon Task Force took this up because we're still down, depending on how you calculate the numbers, up to 50% in ridership overall. So now is the time to kind of look at the future of transit and how we go forward. So the regional network manager, which is coming out of MTC, and I know that this was part of that, and I applaud Sonoma County under all of your leadership for jumping out in front of this. It's really about coordinating that regional transit, consolidating as we can, and getting those 27 to really act as one, especially on the regional front, where if people who are traveling throughout the Bay Area for whatever reasons really don't care who they're actually traveling with. They just want to know how to get from point A to point B going forward. So I know the Clipper Bay Pass was part of that, has been coming out of that too, the free and discounted fares for students. So look forward to that. The funding that we have, and I noticed, I was just curious about the balance that's left within that account. And there'll be other activities. I know this is the low hanging fruit, as you could imagine, kind of coordinating the fares, coordinating the websites, the branding of things, and just getting that. I think at some point, the funding sources are so different for all the entities, which is going to be difficult, and the collective bargaining agreements certainly are all different for every entity as well. But I think it's a good step forward, and it should be interesting as we go forward with this new regional network manager, because right now, well, it will be voluntary participation, but right now there really isn't that much coordination unless it's between one or two separate individual agencies. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director. And I did want to call out, since I called out Rachel and Brian for their good work, I also wanted to call out Jared with Petaluma Transit as well for his efforts on this. Director Kelly?
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I did have a question about the Clipper Start program, but I did want to just echo, thank you for the presentation. And to Director Rabbit's point, I think we were able to really take advantage of what wasn't working or what could be optimized, and using the COVID emergency really as a place to say, let's make sure when we come back from the pandemic that we don't just go back to a baseline that might not be working, both for what's the best use of these dollars as well as what's working for transit riders, and how do we make sure that, to Director Giudice's point, that it's a seamless experience, that riders don't care what agency bus they're hopping on. They just want to know that they're going to get from point A to point B, and that point B is actually where they want to go, and they want to know how much is it going to cost and when will I get there. And to the extent that we can really use this as an integrating moment for these agencies and help to, support them to get to where we really want transit ridership to be for our county to achieve our climate goals, that's what we're here for. And to that, I'm curious about the Clipper Start program, the low income discount program that's Bay Area wide. And I know many of our agencies are participating in that program, but for last I heard, we weren't really seeing a lot of utilization of that program. And I'm curious if there is an opportunity within this integration program. And I know obviously that's not the item before us today, but I do think the website as being kind of a key tool of where people go to find out information about how much is this going to cost and how do I get a pass? For folks who don't already have a Clipper card and are looking at purchasing one, and the Clipper Start program being this great discount program that's a big secret, how do we use this opportunity to educate the public about the Clipper Start program? Are we looking at potential partnership opportunities with on the ground community organizations, just like you see, historically, for example, like CalFresh benefits? Those benefits used to be you have to go to your community health clinic to find out about it, but now we're seeing CalFresh benefit enrollments happening within school districts, in the schools. And so going kind of, where do we find people who would be able to be eligible for these discounts, who qualify based on their income status? How can we better attract them to raise awareness about the Clipper Start program and use community partners or entities to enroll folks, which would then increase ridership? Is that on your guys' radar at all in terms of the Clipper Start program?
Yeah, I think we've had some discussion around this and some acknowledgement that it, definitely needs more promotion. I've heard of some other transit agencies outside of Sonoma County working with different agencies outside of transit to try and promote it. So I definitely think it's something that is worth further discussion and looking into.
Yeah, I think just in thinking through the item we had before us, and this is my last, sorry, that we were talking about Latino service providers and that grant, as it relates to our climate goals. And obviously we know transportation is our #1 source of GHG. How do we find people where they are? How do we use trusted community partners who are on the ground with these relationships to figure out how do we have these conversations about transit utilization and fares, and the cost of it being one of the biggest barriers? Knowing that this program exists, we're just kind of connecting the dots. So I would love to see us think through. It will get more people on the bus, which is good for all of these transit providers if we can help to kind of convene and connect them to those resources. So I'd love to see that in the future. Thank you.
All right, let's jump up to the vice chair.
Thank you. One question that I have, and it goes sort of beyond the phase 1, which I'm really excited about, which is, how do we look at systems integration and actual improvements to service, and in particular integration with SMART? I just want to acknowledge that I think that West, East, and North County have terrible access to SMART, right? Like in Guerneville, you could get on a bus and I think it would take you well over an hour to get to the Ronert Park station in order to board the SMART train. And so to what extent will we also be looking at gaps in service, potential for improvements, and in addition to sort of the potential for improvements in terms of connectivity between the systems?
So that's a great question. We did just kick off a different contract with Nelson Nygaard and TY Lin to do an integrated transit service plan. So that study will look at both the overlapping service areas between the 3 bus operators, as well as regional connections. So we do hope to get some really good information out of that to inform the regional transit service in Sonoma County. So that is underway and will be going on through the rest of this calendar year.
Great. My request would just be that it also look at sort of underserved areas that may potentially need, sort of service connection, because I think that we have a lot of those areas that just, and not just because, like, for instance, we have a road that's failing in my district. And so bus service actually stopped to an entire community as a result of the road failure. But when you just look at areas that are served extraordinarily infrequently, essentially a resident can't actually take the bus into Santa Rosa and get back on the same day because the schedules just don't line up in an effective way. So if there's a way that we could look at that, particularly maybe highlighting some more disadvantaged communities, that would be fantastic. And then just one final thought, I really appreciated what Director Kelly brought up, and my mind immediately went back to our prior agenda item around the Promotores Verde, I think it was, and sort of, is there an opportunity to work with our promotores and in our communities to really try to increase access to the discounted Clipper card, because I think that that is a great point, and that if folks aren't accessing it, then that's on us to try to figure out ways to make it more available and accessible to them.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Let's go to Director Bagby.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation, Dana. Thanks so much for all your hard work and in this sphere. And actually, thanks also to Director Rabbit for taking on the Blue Ribbon Task Force and helping to bring this forward here. But I have a couple of specific questions. Some specific questions, and then maybe some more theological questions or larger questions. And one is that I noticed in the contract that we're only contracting for integration to the Google Transit, and I just was wondering if we had looked at Apple Maps, if we're going to try to stay parallel, or what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, so my understanding of how Trillium, there's two operators who already have their websites on the Trillium platform, which integrates with the Google Transit mapping system. And so the kind of easiest way to get all three on board is to have the third go onto that same platform. I think that it's been working well for the other operators that use the platform, and so that was really kind of how we went in that direction.
And I was wondering if it was possibly, and I don't know the answer to this, but we also I mentioned the transit app, which is actually you can use that to try to figure out a bus that will connect you with Smart, that will connect you with hopefully the ferry. So it actually is, and it's a whole and I'm just wondering if it's because it grabs its data from Google Maps. If that's kind of what the push was, is because some of those separate standalone transportation apps probably grab their data from Google. Does that make sense?
And I have no voice. I blame David because I think I caught his cold via Zoom. And I know. It's like the cold is 3 days, the laryngitis is 3 weeks. So I apologize. But what was my question? So is the app is the data for some of the transit apps, is it accessed through Google Transit? And is that why many of these transportation contracts we're seeing, it's kind of exclusively has Google Transit as the in the line item of the contract?
I believe that Google Transit pulls their data from an open GTFS feed, which is General Transit Specification feed, that is actually on the 511.org website for the Bay Area.
Okay.
And other apps pull from that data as well.
Okay. And then just to kind of follow up, I would be curious to know the answer to that question, if we could maybe talk offline a little bit more about that. And also just to follow up, I'm wondering if the Trillium has data on the percentage of their folks who go onto their website who are accessing it via smartphone, tablet, or desktop. And it's kind of less important now to say, oh, is this mobile friendly? Because I think that most of the developers are pretty on board with that, but I think it's still kind of worth asking the question. And then this may not be something that pertains necessarily to this contract, but something we might want to ask ourselves too. Is this platform something that is our primary kind of this is where you go for general information, and then are we pushing an app like Transit or another app to make it easier for people to access transit? Or what's the why here? Why are they going to this website to look for information on transit in Sonoma County? And then what's the best way for them to connect that transit in Sonoma County that takes you outside of the county, or transit from outside the county that brings you into Sonoma County? So if we can answer that, that's kind of my question, is that what's the why here, and what's the information that we're trying to give people to help them make it easy for them to use transit? Do we know that, or do we not know that?
Well, I guess I'll attempt to answer part of that question. I think that having the ability to go directly to the transit operator's websites, eventually one landing page to go to all three of them, that will remain an important location for information, because that, maybe some people's first way of finding information. And in terms of other apps or platforms that would that people could find information on, I think that that's something that we're kind of discussing right now. There was there have been some efforts to push the transit app, and now the Clipper app is actually being used quite a bit. And now that people are able to put their Clipper cards on the mobile app. So there's definitely been some discussion among the transit operators on what to, what to push forward now. And I think that's something that, we'll be discussing more and solidifying in the near future.
Great, thank you. And it's my experience that the apps and they sort of leapfrog each other. And so, yeah, it's difficult, but thanks for all your hard work on this. I look forward to when I get to use this. And just as a shameless, unsolicited plug, I use the Sonoma County Transit website all the time. And it's looking and I know it can be, I think it's very helpful, and I'm looking forward to the improved platform. I think it's going to be great. So great job, Dana.
Director Love.
It's Director Bagby asked a lot of the questions that I was.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm glad. Because then I've been in, mine doesn't have to be so long and everyone, that's good. So one of the things with websites is finding them. It's so when people start, looking for them, lots of erroneous things pop up as a result. So is there any effort to be made when through this contract to then, once it's live, do some sort of paid promotion for it, so that when people do Google searches, it's the first thing that pops up instead of something that leads them down a rabbit hole into something else? Because that's really the key. I mean, websites are great, but if you can't find the right one, you're going to have a lot of history. And then, so that's kind of a promotion recommendation, I suppose. And then I just concur with everything regarding accessibility on mobile, because most people are using mobile. I just carry this around just because it looks cool, but really, it's I've got 2 phones, and most people do that, so it has to be really mobile accessible. And then if it is, and they do happen to hit the right thing and they find the right thing, it should then lead them into some sort of app, whether it's Clipper card or something like that. That that should be directly there, so that they've got everything with one phone. Thank you.
Director Reynosa.
Yeah, quick question. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm on the website right now. I don't see any offerings for a different language. Will there be multiple language options on this new website?
I think that's, we definitely need to look at that. Which
I'm on the Sonoma County Transit.
Okay.
sctransit.com.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? All right, let's go to public comment. Do we have any comments in the room? Seeing none. Drew, any online?
We do have one member of the public with their hands up, Rick Letman. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Chair Carsey, Chair Rogers. So integration sounds like a great idea, but here we are in 2023. I saw the date 2012 go by on that report we saw earlier. That was over a decade ago that we've been talking about this. What's taking so long? Time is passing. The climate isn't waiting for us. Climate change is occurring. We've got to move on this. I personally would like to be doing my part by riding transit as much as I can. There's a bus stop just a few steps away from my house, but I can't afford to spend half a day riding around the county on buses to do something I could do in 20 minutes by car. And I have a personal stake in this because time isn't waiting for me either. I'm already too old to ride a bicycle. I can hardly walk, and it's probably dangerous to drive a car, especially at night. So I hope that the study phase will be over soon, and we can actually get into the do part.
All right, thank you, Rick. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you, Drew. I'll bring it back and I'll look to see if there's a motion to authorize the executive director to enter into a contract with Trillium for an amount of $59,320.
So moved, Healdsburg. Second.
And a second from Katati. Any additional discussion from the board?
Couple of follow-up questions.
If you'd like to, go ahead,
If
Director.
Dana wouldn't mind, is the upgraded platform from Trillium, will that include a more obvious bilingual component? And then also just to follow up, just on the Sonoma County Transit page, I noticed that they promote Next Bus, and that kind of speaks to my earlier question about kind of, which apps do you promote? And is there going to, are we going to, have a further discussion about which apps we're going to standardize on?
Yeah, so to the first point about the translation, that's something we will definitely make sure that is in the next phases of the website development. And as far as the apps, yes, that is part of our scope of work for the overall transit integration project, is to line up those apps. And there's a step back of information that feeds into those apps that the operators are not all using the same platforms and contractors for right now. So that is something that we're looking at aligning.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead,
And
Director.
just to add, I mean, I would like to see multilingual, just not just bilingual.
Sure.
Thank you.
How about every language that we put on the Unum statue in downtown Santa Rosa? Yes. Any other comments? All right, Drew, please call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Kater Thompson,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
You see that motion passing.
All right, let's go to item 5.4.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, directors. I'll be providing an update on Senate Bill 743 and VMT. And also provide a description of a grant application we put together to seek funding to study a potential VMT mitigation program for Sonoma County. So, you guys are ahead of me here. So you've probably heard me talk about Senate Bill 743 before, but I did want to provide just a really high level brief overview for any of our new directors on what Senate Bill 743 is. It's state legislation that eliminated delay, congestion, or level of service as a CEQA, or California Environmental Quality Act metric, in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, encourage infill development, and improve public health through active transportation. So it's been around for a number of years now, and the state identified vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, as the preferred metric for measuring transportation environmental impacts. It shifts the focus of mitigation from reducing congestion to reducing total travel in an area, or VMT. And the implementation deadline for SB 743 was July 1st, 2020. So it's been out in the wild for a while, and you may have seen something come across your boards or councils. So VMT is a central component of SB 743 implementation. So, but it's much more difficult to measure than congestion. You can actually walk out to a roadway or intersection and see cars backed up and measure how long it takes for them to get through. VMT is a more higher level regional metric, and it needs to be estimated using calculations and models. VMT represents the number of trips a person takes along with the length of those trips. So if a person makes 5 trips per day that are 10 miles long each, they generate 50 VMT per day. VMT is really looking at the big picture, not the individual localized impacts of travel impacts that were looked at previously when considering level of service and congestion. So the process for analyzing a project using VMT is fairly in-depth, but here's a high-level summary with some basic steps on how that's done. The state's recommended that certain low-level VMT projects can be screened out and don't need to be analyzed. So projects can be screened based on project size, project type, location in low VMT areas, or using other locally identified screening criteria. So you may have considered some of these already in your jurisdictions. If VMT analysis is required, project VMT needs to be calculated somehow using equations or a travel model or other tools. Next, project VMTs compared to local VMT thresholds. Again, you may have seen some of these thresholds come before your bodies. And if the project generates VMT above the threshold, VMT needs to be mitigated. And that's kind of where we're at now. We've done a lot of work in these first 3 steps. Right now, we're trying to figure out, what if a project does have a VMT impact? What do we do then? So last year, we worked with your local staff and consultants from Fair and Peers to develop a VMT mitigation or reduction calculator that helps estimate the VMT reduction benefits of different mitigations, like improving connections to transit, providing bicycle pedestrian improvements, and travel demand management improvements. So that's available on our website, and it's been used to do some of that analysis already. Along with that, there's been a lot of interest in the county and at the state at looking at VMT impact fees, mitigation banking, and exchange programs. So right now, there are kind of 3 different ideas out there right now. And I would say that there's a lot of interest at the local level here. A lot of the VMT policies that have come before your boards and councils mentioned this specifically. So it's something that we want to work on. But 3 ideas that are out there being studied right now are VMT-based transportation impact fee programs. This is something that Los Angeles is doing right now. And in this case, let me get to the right place here. Project sponsors pay a fee that could be applied to fund VMT reducing projects, but this does require a nexus study that's attached to some sort of VMT reduction goal to justify those fees. So there are a few other programs that are being considered. One are VMT mitigation exchanges. And in this case, a VMT producing project would be matched up to a VMT reducing project. So say a housing development that would produce VMT could be matched up with a bicycle pedestrian project somewhere, and that VMT producing project could help implement that other project. So that's currently being examined by Contra Costa County. And then finally, there are VMT mitigation banks. And in this case, a monetary value for VMT reduction is calculated by looking at projects on VMT reduction goals. And in this case, a project sponsor could purchase credits from the bank that could be used to fund VMT reductions offsite. So here's just a summary of what we've done at SCTA to help support your local staff as they implement SB 743. SCTA is not generally a lead agency, so we're not implementing this directly. So we've been acting in an advisory and kind of technical support role here. So one thing we've been doing is sharing information and providing education. So this is a regular topic of discussion at our advisory committees, the Technical Advisory Committee and PAC particularly, where we pass on information and local staff can actually share information about how they're handling this and different roadblocks they're facing. We also produce VMT screening maps that show high and low VMT areas. These are hosted on our website. We're able to use our travel model and other data to estimate project level VMT and provide other data for setting policy. As I mentioned before, we worked to produce the VMT mitigation and reduction calculator. And right now, what we're working on is we're seeking grant funding through the Caltrans Sustainable Planning Grant Program to get a consultant on board to look at different options to make recommendations for how this could be administered and set up in Sonoma County. So this is pretty new. There's not a lot out there right now. And we'd like to get some help to look at different projects and what we could do here. The grant application was due last Thursday, so we did submit an application. But we'll find out if our application was successful sometime this summer. And so we've requested $343,000 in grant funding to fund the project. And if we are awarded grant funding, we'll need to bring this back to you to authorize an agreement with Caltrans at that point. So I know it does say action in the agenda, so I'd welcome an action to authorize our grant submission that we've already put in, but with the understanding that there will be action later on if we are awarded grant funding through the program. So with that, I'll go ahead and move to the last slide here. This is just a link to our resources page for forecasting and travel data. This includes a section on SB 743 support, including links to outside information, our VMT maps, the VMT reduction calculator, and other resources. So with that, again, we technically don't need action until later this year, but if the board, since it's listed on the agenda, if you would like to take action and authorize our previous submission, would welcome that as well, and would turn it back over to you for any questions and discussion.
Great, thank you. I did have one quick question. Is the vision for the VMT mitigation bank to be one mitigation bank that covers all of Sonoma County jurisdictions? Or was it to help us to build the framework for each jurisdiction establishing their own?
I think it could go either way. And I think the idea, how we've written the scope is to have a consultant come in and talk about different options and, list pros and cons for either approach, right? I know local staff have looked to us at SCTA to maybe administer a program. So that would be one option. But the recommendation could be to provide a framework and methods for implementing that at the local level as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know that that was one of the discussions we had with the establishment of the Renewal Enterprise District was how to create this body that was going to amplify efforts while also still having a return to source. So that might be a decent model to look at. I'll go to Director Bagby.
I should let Sandra go first this time now. That was there you go.
Oh, great.
So, Chris, just a quick question first, before I dive into probably a comment that a lot of council members will have in common. And one is, when I was just sort of doing the reading and just helping me get my brain around this, is it a false equivalency in my mind, or is there kind of an equivalency to the Quimby Act? Because I kind of looked at it as the developer kind of paying in lieu fees into an account that then can be used, just like we do, with Parks and Recreation in many of our jurisdictions. I mean, am I completely off, or is that kind of?
That could definitely be how it could be set up.
Okay, so if you were kind of explaining it to folks, because I've been having trouble explaining to folks the move from LOS to VMT, and that's just after reading the packet today. That's just sort of what came up, is that might be the easiest way to start a conversation about this. And then secondly, also based on reading the packet today and listening to your presentation, I have a very big concern for my community that's 17 miles from my neighbor community, and that is paying into a fund that where the funds would not then come back to my community. And there is an argument, I think, to be made for connectivity. Absolutely, is that maybe we all communally agree that we want to connect our more rural and distant areas to smart, for example, as Director Hopkins brought up earlier. So I see advantages and disadvantages, but honestly, as one of the most isolated incorporated areas in Sonoma County, I know that that's going to be a point of concern for my staff and my fellow council members, is that if it's more communal in nature, that we make sure that we get back what we have put into it. So you might want to address that elephant in the room. Am I right, Gerard? So
well, I think we all have the same concern. I think we all have the same concern for different reasons.
For different reasons. Yeah, it's a really good way of phrasing it, is that we're going to kind of look at it from a different lens, but it is making sure that our communities get back what we've potentially invested in it, but also understanding that there is an advantage in maybe us being able to do larger connectivity projects. So that's the kind of the caution that I would bring to it going forward.
And so if we do receive grant funding, I can definitely write that into the final scope to make sure to examine that. And we would have a project TAC as well, and we'd be looking for representatives from your local staff to help guide the project as well and provide recommendations. And we certainly love to hear them say the same thing as we work on the project. So thank you.
Director Corsi?
Thanks. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but with, focusing on mitigation banking and exchange programs, seems like the in lieu situation that whatever happens doesn't happen at the project, it happens somewhere else. Why are we not looking at project-based mitigation, such as, a shuttle bus or other options to get people out of their cars and onto some kind of public transit or non-transit bicycle pedestrian situations?
That's definitely the first priority. And, that's what we focused on with the VMT reduction calculator, is looking at the on-site mitigations. But a lot of times that doesn't get you far enough.
Why aren't we looking at that as part of this stuff?
Additional mitigations on top.
I'm just,
Yeah.
we're talking about, you put three options up there,
Yeah.
none of which are project based, and we're selecting two of those to kind of pursue.
Yeah. So I think the local guidance on this already is exactly doing what you're saying, is focusing on that site specific VMT reduction first. And if the reductions aren't able to be achieved on site, to look at something like this offsite mitigation program. But I can definitely emphasize that as well, that should be a preference and a priority, that to mitigate first on site and then go to this as a last resort.
Yeah, and I would go back to the in lieu example, in lieu fees. That's always the first option of a developer, is because it's cheaper that way. And so I wonder if there's some incentive that we can build into the project based.
Director Rabbit?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris, for the work. I'm curious, is the feeling that the VMT-based transportation impact fee would be in lieu of or in place of the regular traffic impact fee, or do jurisdictions look at the regular traffic impact fee as there's still a need for the additional infrastructure no matter what? So I'm just curious, are we looking at a single fee or now two fees on this?
It could be both, right? It depends on the development guidelines at the individual jurisdiction. So I know a lot of jurisdictions are still looking at congestion to congestion-based mitigation fees to help provide additional capacity on certain areas. So it depends on the jurisdiction, how you want to set up your development review process.
Okay, I think that's going to be an interesting
There's some
outcome
tension
to
there.
figure out. I will also say this, the Quimby Act really talked in the developer impact fees, which are really a result of Prop 13, when all the things that were paid for property taxes went away. The nexus studies that are required are basically having the developer buy a proportionate fair share into the existing infrastructure that collectively the community owns, and then figuring out the additional charge on those things. I'm not sure how that works with BMT. So I'm not even sure if that could be legally allowed to go down that path, because it seems to me that that's a completely different type of mitigation, because it's not something, unless you calculate the existing BMT for your community and compare that between it, but thoughts?
So I'm not sure yet either. That's why we're looking to get a consultant on board to help out with work through some of these issues. And checking in with the legal counsel is definitely part of that, right? Like what's possible. And, legal counsel is still grappling with this too. How do we, VMT is, you can't look out the window and see what's going on, right? It's relying on models and, estimations and things like that. So I imagine for it to work, it would have to look at existing VMT rates using a model or some sort of data and kind of tier off that. But we definitely be looking at the consultant to bring some expertise in that area to help provide some recommendations, and would definitely want to consult with legal counsel on potential pitfalls and issues that we'd be running into there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Director Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. I definitely had a similar lens in looking at how this will be structured, and I'm looking forward to authorizing it or thumbing up the fact that it's already gone out, and looking forward to hearing a response and hopefully receiving that funding. I think one of the places where I see this intersect with the work that we've been doing and some of the questions that were raised when we were adopting our new transit plan, but looking at RCPA impacts and countywide and right, looking at how do we look at our transportation emissions with our projects that we're funding collectively here. And as we've transitioned to this current funding cycle where we're having all the jurisdictions submit their priority projects and they're being scored and ranked based on sources of funding, but then also on priorities of that we've established. I think that there's a really interesting additional lens that we've, I think, been aiming towards, maybe naming it or not, where we're looking at where do RCPA's goals and SCTA's goals come together. And as we're looking at prioritizing and funding certain transportation projects or complete streets projects or pedestrian and bike projects, how do we ensure that they're meeting our climate goals? And I think this having a VMT lens on how we evaluate some of those projects that we collectively choose to fund or not, I think will be a really strong place to go, because we know what we're currently doing isn't necessarily working. And so I think this is a great next step. It'll be tricky to see how it kind of unfolds, but I think that the process that we've seen roll out in this last funding cycle for our jurisdictions projects and what we're funding, I think it will have a seat in that. And I think it will play a good role. And I look forward to it. And I hear what Director Bagby is saying, but I also think if we don't have an on the ground local mitigation that will work, or if you have an on-site mitigation, but it's not enough, I would love to see using those developer dollars going to fund a project that's going to move the needle in a population center where you have enough needle to move. And if, there aren't enough bodies or not enough, cars to get out of in a local jurisdiction, I think it can be a both. And that's what I would hope to see can happen. Because otherwise, I think that if there aren't enough mitigation efforts, if there aren't enough GHGs to reduce in those local jurisdictions, then we want to see them get reduced somewhere. So those are my non-question comments. Thanks.
Director Lowe?
I guess, so you're talking about this in relationship to projects that are funded, municipal and county projects, but not private funding projects?
Both.
Both,
Yeah.
okay. Because, is there any prioritization for, let's say you have a road that right now has very little vehicle miles traveled, is rural or semi-rural in some respects. And then there are two proposals that are gonna put, possibly up to 1,500 residences and a small boutique hotel. No one knows. Hypothetical. Of course, but Sonoma Developmental Center. Okay, for those who don't. But all of a sudden you have, very little vehicle miles traveled between the city of Sonoma and, let's say, Glenwood. And then, but all of a sudden you now have two huge projects, one is Sonoma Developmental Center and the other one's Tanner Boys Center potential project. Is there any way to prioritize that, this, you've now changed a transit road from a rural road to a major thoroughfare, or semi-major thoroughfare in it, would that get a priority over, let's say, trying to mitigate Highway 12 through the city of Sonoma, something like that? I mean, how do we prioritize, vehicle? To me, it's like, it would be it's like with a lot of other things, you want to stop whatever it is from getting worse. And by creating these kind of situations where there is no way to mitigate it, or potentially there's no way to mitigate it in that area, how do we alleviate any of that impact? I mean, I've sort of wandered all around that question. I apologize, but I think you know where I'm going. It's like, what do we do for these rural areas that are going to be impacted?
it's particularly tough in the rural areas when you're considering VMT, right? Things are further away, and so people are driving further distances. So, I think focusing on on-site mitigation is really important, trying to make sure there are destinations for people living, on that site. To go to closer in could be a good first approach, but in some cases you may not be able to mitigate, right? This may be a way to help alleviate some of that, but it may be cost prohibitive at some point too. So that, we're still trying to feel, this is a pretty new, it went into effect in 2020. And so people are still trying to figure out exactly how it's going to play out. So, but yeah, in the rural areas, particularly, it's going to be difficult. But yeah, I think, as I said, focusing site level first and then looking at something like this after that's probably gonna-
Definitely needed, obviously.
yeah.
Thank you.
Director Harvey, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, to add on to what Director Bagby said about, money coming back or money going out to everyone. I think that we can probably do both. And I think that that might be better for everyone, to kind of say some amount comes back to the community from whence it came. But we might have some more regional things, the connectivity that was brought out and things like that. We might need to take a portion of that. So we might want to look at, modeling it, what the percents might be, but, kind of a sharing where part goes regionally and part stays back in the communities.
Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you. And I want to recognize that we're probably asking a lot of questions that don't yet have answers since we're still so early in this process. But I have another one along those lines, which is, do we sort of have any sense of what the burden of proof will be in terms of the mitigation projects? Because one thing that actually came up at an Air District Committee meeting last week, we were looking at this pot of funding that's set aside for basically VMT reductions, it's vehicle emissions reductions. And 90% of it was going into vehicle electrification and replacement, and only 10% of it was going into bike and pedestrian projects. And so we, of course, all jumped on that because we want to see more bike and pedestrian projects. And essentially the reason was it's really, really challenging to prove the VMT reductions on bike and ped projects, especially since they often are sort of built segments at a time. And so I'm just kind of wondering, are we going to see a similar kind of a bias towards projects that are more easily and clearly quantifiable, even though bike and pedestrian and active transportation has a lot of other benefits, to the community in terms of health benefits, in terms of addressing equity issues and all kinds of things like that. So that's my question, is sort of what is the burden of proof that's going to be required, and will that sort of ultimately steer money into certain pots over others?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So just a couple responses to that. One is the research is a little thin on VMT mitigation and reductions right now. So this is a very hot topic right now. So the academic community is kind of wading in and doing more research on this. So we're expecting to see the research base grow over time. So hopefully that'll help. This certainly is something that we'll want our consultant team and legal counsel to weigh in on, how close can those connections be made? And I would comment on electrification. So in the context of SB 743, electrification isn't a valid mitigation since it's focused on VMT, not, clean travel or GHG reduction specifically. So just one thing to keep in mind. So you could cut that out, and maybe that would have those bicycle pedestrian projects compete a little better.
Yeah, and I would think that the sort of comparable here would likely be sequestration projects, which would be more easily quantifiable, but which again wouldn't have the active transportation benefits.
All right, let's jump over to Director Rabbit.
One last fight here. Remind me, Chris, if the at the end of the day, it's a CEQA analysis, correct? So worst case scenario is you do what you can, it's significant and unavoidable.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that plays into, again, going back to the development impact fee talk, because I think that creates, you can't have a set fee when you're mitigating on a document and the mitigations come out of that document in that way, as opposed to a park fee that's set by ordinance, a other fee that's set by ordinance. And I guess we all know that. And I think at the end of the day, while the academics are going to be looking at this, who's really going to be looking at this is the legal folks out there, because this is going to be around for a long time in all sorts of lawsuits.
Yeah. Any other questions from the board? All right.
Just
Yeah, go ahead, Director.
just to comment that my vehicle miles travel has increased with the reduction of the COVID emergency.
Yeah, we'll go there in the next item. I appreciate it. Let's turn to public comment and see if there's anyone who'd like to speak on this item. Seeing none in the room.
All right, so I see 3 members of the public with their hands up on this item, and we will start with Zeno Switnick. Zeno, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you for taking my comment. I wonder what the definitions of a project. I have noticed often projects in a kind of a broad sense includes the closing of a building. And what comes to mind is the school in Forestville that has led to enormous increase in vehicle mile travel. At Annalee High School, there's a traffic jam in Sebastopol around 2:30, 3:30. So I'm concerned about whether the intent of this particular change captures what is happening on the ground often, where the closing of a hospital or school can have these big impacts that seem to be completely under the radar of the people that need to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeno. Next I have in line is Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. We have been looking at this from the Transportation and Land Use Coalition's perspective. And it seems to me that the primary advantage of having a mitigation bank is that you can use that in lieu of a finding of overriding considerations, which really just says this problem is too complicated for us. We can't deal with it. But the discussion leads me to believe that we're still a long way from figuring out how this is going to work. My initial reaction was that the main mitigation would be to fund bus transit so that it's within walking distance of the project that you're going to build. That would be an ongoing requirement to pay for that year after year. So I wouldn't think that most projects could support it. But I appreciate having this conversation for all of us because this is a very complex area, and it's more complex than I realized before. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next we have Rick Lutman. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you again, Drew, and thank you. Let me get this right now. Chair Rogers, too many people named Chris. I wanted to talk about this mitigation bank. Today is the first day I've heard about this, and I already don't like it. I think it's a bad idea. I can imagine developers would love the thought that some project they are interested in carrying out that would increase VMT is not entirely ruled out if they can find something to offset it. But I don't see the public benefit to this. A VMT reducing project is canceled out by some VMT increasing project. Where does the round trip get the public? We just can't afford to be treading water anymore. climate change is an increasing threat every single day. There's no more time for compromises and half measures. I think we just ought to make it a principle that we do not approve VMT increasing projects anymore, period. That's my opinion.
All right, let's see if we're done on Zoom.
Thank you, Eric. I don't see any members of the public on Zoom. Chair Rogers.
All right, we'll come on back to you, Dwayne.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, specifically an area that has been burdened by heavy development in a disadvantaged, overburdened, and underserved area that was essentially kind of, if you'll excuse the expression, a sacrificial lamb, where development utilizing a program called mitigation banks for California tiger salamanders. Our specific area has salamanders. The idea was like, okay, we're going to let developers kill some salamanders because we're going to set up some mitigation banks over here, and that's going to make it all good. Well, essentially what happens is developers buy these credits in a mitigation bank. They do whatever they want to do in terms of building their project, and it doesn't really save those salamanders. They're just dead. And the thing about this type of approach for vehicle miles traveled, you're at the beginning of the process. You folks could be the oversight. You want to take that on? That's what's most important, is what the oversight's going to be. And if there's going to be some true measure of what's occurring and what actually happens on the ground. A lot of planners like to use the term ground truthing. They like to use the term robust. Got all these terms they like to use in these discussions, but the real deal comes down to, can you trust what's going to happen? And as I look at this, Mr. Lettman, he pretty much summed it up. This might be a bad idea. He doesn't see any public benefit yet at this time. Mr. Bertelbaugh right there at the beginning. And Mr. Zeno, I'm going to just go with his name. I've met him before. The impacts are under the radar. This is what frequently happens with all these types of government situations. You folks get led down a path. It's kind of a rosy path by somebody saying, oh, we've passed something. We've got a Senate bill that came down. We're going to do this and let's get together. Unless you have some specific organizational capacity here in your organization with a legal team that's going to be able to look at this and make it happen the way you want it to happen, I would really back off. I think this is going nowhere fast in the sense of it helping the public in any way, shape, or form. And Mr. Bertelbaugh's idea about the bus travel. I spoke with you earlier about how this is like not happening. People aren't riding the bus. I get on buses all over the Bay Area. They're almost empty almost all the time. The reason they're filling up here in Sonoma County, we're giving school kids free rides. That gets people on there. So if you're willing to subsidize free bus travel, you might get that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other comments from the public?
No other comments from the public, Chair Rogers.
All right, I will bring it back to the board, see if there's a motion.
Chair Rogers, since we've already submitted the grant application, I think what I'd like to, I move that we request a report from staff, should we receive the funding? And that would be the limit of the action at this time.
Okay. All right.
Could I just make a comment, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Sorry. So the deadline approached prior to obviously the board meeting happening. It is not typical for us to submit things without board authorization. We obviously can withdraw something. We erred on the side of submitting as opposed to not. So it would be great to get the authority from the board that we did. You did want us to do this, just so that, that'd be great.
I think I heard that in the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to withdraw and reword my motion, which is I move that we authorize staff to submit a grant application in the amount of $343,000 for the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Grant application, and that we'd love a report from staff should we receive the funding.
So we got a motion. We have a second from Director Lowe. I will say, Madam Executive Director, I love when staff is aggressive about going after dollars. And would hate for us to miss an opportunity because we didn't have a meeting that was scheduled. And so I think it's appropriate to submit with the option to pull back if we'd like to. Also, before we actually do anything with the funds, it still needs approval from the board. So just for the record, I appreciate the approach of being more aggressive.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. Yeah, this is, I do
Use
appreciate.
the microphone, please.
I really need it. I'm sorry. I know I really appreciate you going after this. This is about the implementation of existing legislation, and it's going to affect all cities and jurisdictions. And so, and I appreciate you in inviting the comment from the 9 cities and of course the Board of Supervisors. This is moving forward due to legislation, and as usual, you guys have just jumped right on this and gone after funding so that we can figure out how to best implement it in our community. So thank you, Chris, for your hard work on this. And other Chris, I'll be specific. Yeah, Chris Barney, thank you.
Any other comments? All right, Drew, let's call the vote.
All right, Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Cater Thompson.
Yes.
For the vote, yes. Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yeah.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Yes.
Director Lowe,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that passing.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item 5.5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is this is sort of an update discussion item regarding a couple of topics. One is the notion of a climate bond. The governor's budget, preliminary budget included the words climate bond, so interest was piqued as what that might mean. Since that happened, the discussions have definitely trended more towards water bond and improvements related to water infrastructure, water storage, water conservation. No shortage right now, but future shortage. And I think, you know, from a staff perspective, we've been just trying to track and see if the climate discussion evolves more robustly beyond water. Particularly as it relates to the discussions around the climate protection initiative and whether or not the timing would be such that we would have potentially competing items on a ballot. So that is, we put this on there just in case there was other sort of intelligence gathering from board members that you could share information. And then the second is in a similar sort of vein related to the Brown Act. And as you know, we are here as the, meeting in person for the first time under the rules that were approved last year for the new Brown Act. Our advisory committees have also started meeting this month. But in the lead up, they have expressed a lot of concern about the efficiency and effectiveness and ability to participate in person, especially now that they are clearly aware that it's very possible to do these regional type meetings remotely, still with public participation and in fact greater participation than when they're in person. So there have been some efforts to communicate concerns through various different channels. There's the California Council of Governments group, or CalCog, who is pursuing potential legislation because of the regional nature of their organization. They include regions like the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, where you've got Imperial County and LA County and meetings of, that take a full day and 2 days of travel. And even in the Bay Area, we've got Sonoma County meetings taking place in San Francisco. So that's sort of one level of discussion where it's policymakers going to regional meetings. Then there's what I started with, which is, advisory committee groups, whether it's staff level or volunteers from citizens groups who want to participate and help, advise the board on policy. They are challenged now by having to meet in person. So there are discussions about if and how we can inform the process in Sacramento to allow for greater sort of hybrid meeting opportunities. And I know Director Lowe's had conversations with some of our legislators, and I think others of you might have as well. And so today it was really just to check in on the status of anything moving forward. It's my understanding there may not be anything moving forward on the Brown Act side, given some trepidation on the part of some legislators. They want to see how it goes under the current situation. But we will continue to track, and I would welcome any guidance or feedback or intel that you might have on those subjects or others.
All right, let's see if there's any questions or comments from the board. Go ahead, Director Corsi.
Well, just some intel, or maybe the opposite.
Some outel.
The Sonoma County Continuum of Care Board voted to not follow all of the Brown Act, but only parts of it, which was an interesting conversation. We believe in the Brown Act, but we don't believe in this part of the Brown Act, so we don't want to have to come to meetings. And it was a 14-2 vote, 16 people. So I happen to believe that, we follow the law. We don't like the law as it's changing, that we try and change it to something that we do like. So I'm completely in favor of advocacy, but I'm not in favor of picking or choosing the laws.
Director Bagby.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page with Director Corsi. I'm not quite ready to raise the Jolly Roger yet. But I believe that we should pursue this advocacy, especially just because of the nature of this board. And I think that we should be practicing what we preach, but also have just heard from so many folks who are, members of advisory committees and very different agencies, is that this has really allowed them to participate actively and more powerfully than they were able to, pre-pandemic. And actually, I think Director Hopkins can testify that even before COVID, we were both on the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, and we made a point of moving the meetings around our district. So we would have most of the meetings in Healdsburg, and we'd have a meeting in Cloverdale, and we'd also hold meetings in Guerneville, and just pre-pandemic, before we knew we were going to all be going through this together, the folks in Guerneville were so grateful. They were like, this is great. I can come to this meeting and I can bring out my topics and I don't have to drive all the way to Healdsburg. And I was kind of like, all the way to Healdsburg? Okay, that's fair. And we got the same feedback from Cloverdale. So it's, I think this is something that we knew before COVID, that this is, when you've got a kind of larger district, that people are grateful and are more likely to participate when you come to a library near them. So I would like to, before I'm not ready to put my pirate hat on, but I not quite yet, but I would definitely support advocacy in this area, because I think that they're hearing it from a lot of agencies all over California. And I would just, every chance we get, remind many of them, their former council members and supervisors as well. And they don't have to abide by these rules. They're having their former colleagues abide by some of those meeting rules. So maybe we could maybe we could move into the 21st century and use technology to reduce our vehicle miles traveled and just be a little more in tune with technology today.
Director Hinton.
So just to kind of weigh in, we had an interesting discussion in Sebastopol because my colleague, Vice Mayor Rich, is a representative on Marin Sonoma mosquito vector. And as of February 8th, they decided to continue the Zoom option. And because we were one of the last councils to continue in Zoom in Sonoma County, there's some legal opinions around that we could have stayed on Zoom, but it was risky for our jurisdiction. So we decided not to. Being the smallest jurisdiction, it's extremely expensive to do both options, and it seems a little unfair, especially with now the technology, that we would all come into what's practically an empty room, and we have 4 or 5 times our citizens on Zoom in the meeting. And so I personally am for some sort of hybrid model being allowed, but I just wanted to put that forth. Again, not a rule breaker. We probably need to change the law, but there are some people that are pushing the rules for sure.
Yeah. Let's go to the vice chair.
I just want to echo my support for doing something, and just wanted to share a few personal anecdotes. One is that we were supposed to have our first Lower Russian River Municipal Advisory Council meeting, under the new rules back in person, had to cancel it because there was an atmospheric river and it was unsafe to drive due to flooding. So, had we had the opportunity to have that online, it could place, important business could have moved forward, but it was canceled due to inclement weather. And then obviously right now I am using one of my 2, opportunities to be sick with kids without bringing it to a vote. And I mean, the reality is, I've heard this from fellow parents and from teachers as well, like kids are just sick all the time right now because they were out of school for 2 years, not having their immune systems exposed to anything. And even if I only catch 50% of what my kids catch, I can tell you that means I'm sick about a quarter of the time. And I actually also heard from Director or Supervisor Melgar in San Francisco. She has a planning commissioner who's in the NICU right now, and they're having trouble in San Francisco meeting quorum at planning commission meetings because there was someone else who also sort of has a longer term issue. And so, a lot of the really citizens-based committees, some people are ready to quit because they can't, afford to drive that long or spend that much time commuting, and they can't do it from the comfort of their own home. So I really do think that we are at risk of decreasing resident participation in our, appointed boards and commissions. And then we're also at risk of having less access to the public because, for instance, when we try to have an in-person meeting, we don't actually have the staffing out in some remote location in rural West County or the technical expertise to run it hybrid. So then it's only in person. So then we actually have fewer folks who are participating in the meeting online. And so we're trying to, navigate that too. But I think that there's a lot of impetus for change. And if we're able to lock arms with some of the other regional boards, Bay Area Air Quality Management District is very interested in this. All of us spent more time commuting to our committee meetings than we sat in our committee meetings last week. I spent 2.5 hours sitting in traffic each way, and we'll take transit this week because I don't have other meetings, but it's a lot of time and it doesn't necessarily make sense. So if we're able to link up with the, other districts, League of Cities, California State Association of Counties, I think that there's a lot of interest in trying to come up with some common sense, not, go all virtual all the time, but something in the middle that maybe doesn't have quite as many strings as the current legislation.
I appreciate that. And in the interest of largely hearing consensus, if folks wouldn't mind going to public comment, I am just hyper aware as a corollary to this discussion that we do have members who have to get to city council meetings tonight as well. So let's go to public comment and then I'll bring it back. If there's anything that still needs to be said by the board, we can make it at that point.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt, and I attend public meetings, and it's wonderful to hear you folks say you want the public at the meetings. This is like a first for me in many ways, because I've gone to so many meetings and felt that it wasn't like they really wanted us there. It was like they were just basically already going through with what they'd gotten planned. And it's just going through the motions to have us be there. And it was just great to hear you all say, yeah, we want to do this. And I'm all for hybrid meetings. Let all those folks, wherever they are, participate as best they can, especially Ms. Hopkins out there doing what she's doing. It's all good to have more people involved. There's a term you might not have heard. It's called authentic community engagement. It's actually been coined by a man who retired from the United States Environmental Protection Agency many decades ago about getting people involved in making their neighborhoods better. Brownfields is one of the things that I work on also. So it's just great to hear all of you say, yeah, you want more people involved. Great. And I'm glad that you opened these meetings back up because I'm a boomer who's not a zoomer. And that's why you never saw me before. All right, you're all looking at, who's that old bald guy? I'm the guy that likes to come to meetings because that's what civic participation is about. And that's what I believe in, the American way. Thank you so much for letting it all happen. Even when you disagree with me, I'm quite polite, you'll see. I don't bite in any way, shape, or form. Thank you kindly for your time. All the best to you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Speaking of hybrid. All right, I'll bring it back and see if there's any additional discussion, any additional comments. Director Harvey.
Yeah, I was surprised in joining the mosquito and vector. They plan on continuing it, not just now, but as long as they can. And they think that in consultation with their attorneys, that they can make the findings every 28 days. And they are finding that they are much more able to get a quorum. Because they were having issues because it's Marin and Sonoma actually getting a quorum together. So they found that it's much more productive and much more able to get people to serve on the boards too, because they had quite a lot of vacancies. So that's the thought.
Director Kelly.
I know that this is an action item and I'm just curious, do you feel that you've received enough input and kind of feedback from us on the items as presented, as well as you presenting that maybe the action isn't needed at this time?
I feel comfortable, Director Kelly, and one of the bills I put in there is still a spot bill, so I'm a little leery to say, let's support something when we don't know what it is yet. So I do feel like I've got a pretty good sense from the board, though, if that's okay. Stick with that.
Looking around for nodding heads and thumbs from folks.
Although I do want to know who the legal counsel is for continuum of care in the vector district.
I might
Yeah.
have-
So go ahead, Director Rabbit.
Just real briefly, ABAG had its first meeting last week and they set up 3 or 4 separate locations. Huge staff impact, but that's a legal way to do that and meet the criteria of the new law. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it that way. I do think that if push comes to shove for the advisory bodies, I support the advocacy to change the advisory body and have that be, and I certainly support hybrid. I do support in-person meetings for electeds and the main board. But you can get around it through, it's about the 10-day noticing, it's about the posting, but that counts as the quorum going forward. That happened last week.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Sonoma Clean Power is also having a regional hub for people, particularly for Mendocino County as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and move the item. We'll move on to our reports and announcements. Madam Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to start with something I probably should have started with at the beginning of the meeting. Before we go to the other items, I'd like to introduce our newest staff member. Oh, she's still there she is. Catherine Stubbs is our new transit planner, and she is working with Dana on transit and travel demand management issues, and we are thrilled to have her. She's been with us a month now. Her first day was the day after the last board meeting, so please join me in welcoming her. So the other items under reports and announcement, the advisory committee agendas were included in the packet. We did have an executive committee meeting. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want to report out.
We had this meeting, but an hour sooner.
We talked about legislation. So yes. The next item is the regional agency reports.
Yep. Who wants to jump in? Director Giudice?
I'm happy to, or defer to my colleague. Building a Bridge District, week of February 26th, transit remains compressed along the 101 corridor, with the bridge being down 30% during commute hours, the buses being down 63%, the ferries being down 64%, resulting in a loss in revenue of $1 million versus pre-pandemic levels. So the struggle of transit is continuing, and better news, our suicide prevention net is 80% installed, and we've awarded contracts to build the suicide prevention net training center in Mill Valley. So that's moving along. And did I miss anything, Supervisor?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other regional reports? Go ahead, Director.
Apologize, but I have to leave. I have a community meeting for our new homeless shelter site.
Where's that?
We're not talking about it in this room.
Wow. Yeah.
Take care. That's good.
Nope.
All right. On that note, let's go on to our SCTA RCPA activities reports.
Good afternoon, directors. Following is an update, a brief update on the SCTA RCPA community affairs related to transportation and climate work over the past month. Staff continued to coordinate with other local transportation authorities to promote ride sharing along the State Route 37 corridor. Promoted social media posts and encouraged folks to find their match by connecting with other commuters that have similar taste in music, audiobooks, or podcasts for the drive. 15 and 30-second video spots were created to relay this message and were aired on local NBC Universal streaming platforms. Funding for the SR37 rideshare promotion is provided by a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. As mentioned earlier, Climate Protection Initiative Program committee meetings began in February, led by local climate leads and supported by SCTA staff. The virtual meeting featured solid public turnout and generated discussion on potential climate funding mechanisms and ways to utilize the resulting funds. Some of you may have seen SCTA distributed a press release promoting the recent funding program that secured $67 million in funds from various state and federal sources to complete 43 transportation programs in projects in Sonoma County. The release was distributed to local press and on SCTA social media channels. Radio coverage featured comments from SCA from Chair Rogers and was also aired on KRCB and Northern California Public Media. The Press Democrat has also posted an article on their funding program as a result. Please let me know if you have any questions about these communications items or anything related. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ross?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Got our climate change report. Howdy, BC.
Good afternoon, Chair Rogers, members of the board. I'd like to give you a brief update on some of the other activities from our climate change activities from the RCPA staff. In addition to the efforts that Ross has already mentioned about our climate protection initiative and our work on supporting the program committees. In addition to that, efforts have continued on our carbon sequestration through compost application pilot project. That project was actually funded through the county's Climate Resilience Fund and includes planning continues for implementation of that project, including the first community compost event, which we held on March 18th in conjunction with the Sonoma Ecology Center. Secondarily, staff participated in the winter regional meeting for the Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network, known as BayCan. Key topics for that meeting and for that group in general are focused on sea level rise along the Bay's edge, and which impacts our Sonoma County for a lot of our work on Highway 37 and a lot of work by BayCan on extreme heat impacts around the Bay Area. We also presented to the SCTA Planning Advisory Committee on the Air District Proposal Letter of Support, which was adopted by this board earlier this afternoon. So we presented to them for feedback. We also facilitated the latest meeting of the Local Government Electric Vehicle Partnership, which meets with fleet managers from a number of the local jurisdictions talking about EV fleet infrastructure, infrastructure and funding opportunities. We have also, our other major effort of work is continuing our implementation of the Bay Area Regional Energy Network programs throughout Sonoma County. Much of this work is facilitated with the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division. So we've continued to meet with them on planning efforts. And that team has been helping to lead a series of online workshop series for homeowners and residents of Sonoma County. They held their first in-person workshop since the start of COVID in March 2020. All of the workshops were held in both English and Spanish. And they have just announced the newest series of workshops that will kick off on April 12th. And that series includes a local contractor outreach event, really trying to pull local building contractors in. So they're both familiar with all the incentive programs that are available, all the resource programs for consumers, and also keeping them up to date with all of the latest kind of technological advances in heat pumps, which are really critical to our climate work. And finally, I wanted to wrap up with an update on the Water Upgrade Saves program. This program continues to expand in both Sebastopol and in Cloverdale. And in general, since the life of the program, approximately 260 in program enrollments have been logged. Of those, about 220 have completed online assessments, and at least 58 have completed full projects in those two cities. Work continues on the Water Upgrade Saves program to expand that program, including coordinating work with the Bay Area, with the BayREN multi-unit family program known as BAMBI. And the program is also looking to meet with a large water utility in Alameda and Contra Costa County, looking to further expand the program. So that's a wrap up of what we've been doing on RCPA. Thank you.
Great, incredible work, BC.
Thanks.
Any questions?
Go
ahead, Director.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I know you're trying to do outreach to contractors, et cetera, to make them aware of all these different programs. Have you thought of partnering maybe with like Friedman's or Lowe's or Home Depot or something and doing like different one-offs and those type of play? I mean, I go into Friedman's and the place is just teeming with contractors and teeming with folks. And, it would be nice to get a little sign there that says, stop, BayREN's here to help or whatever, and kind of advise them of all the different programs that would happen. Just a thought.
That's a great suggestion. I do not know of any activities along that line that we currently have on our plans, but we're meeting as our RCPA team tomorrow to talk about efforts for this upcoming few months. So I'll make sure that's on our list. So great, thank you.
Director Bagby.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing this great program. And just wondering what kind of partnership we've done so far with Daily Acts to maybe like co-promote some of their classes with this program and vice versa.
Specifically with the BayREN incentive programs, I'm not sure. I know that we do a lot of coordination with Daily Acts on the compost program currently, as well as a lot of working with them on some of our outreach to kind of bilingual communities. So that's one that I can also bring back and make sure that as we're talking with Daily Acts and with other community organizations about kind of partnerships, say on one topic, we're here talking about carbon sequestration. What are the other areas where we can be participating and partnering as well? So,
yeah, I love your idea of like partnering with the contractors, and they're another just great and sponsors, and great co-marketing program. So yeah, it would be great to hear more about that if that moves forward. So thanks for your work on this.
Wonderful, thanks for the discussion.
Director Hinton.
Just to clarify, since Sebastopol is a participant and it's gone really well in our community, I just wanted to share that my understanding of the program is the contractors are predetermined. And we had a local preference when we approved the program for our community. So they have to be kind of already in the program is my understanding, and you could clarify if I'm mistaken.
Sure, and I think I should clarify just a little bit. As part of the BayREN programs, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network programs, there is a whole suite of programs, some that are really focused on single family upgrades, some that are multifamily. One is on the Water Upgrade Saves program, and I think that's what you're referring to. Some of the other outreach on building contractors are looking at some of the other program opportunities where there's more of an open enrollment and the ability for any contractor that's active in the Bay Area to really work with the property owner to make sure they get, when the project's done, they can get some incentive monies and rebates back.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Great, good point though, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you so much, BC.
Thank you.
Let's go to our planning update. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks. I'll keep this brief. You've heard from me a lot today already, but I just wanted to talk about a few of the other things that the planning team's working on over the last month or so. So Adam's been working on streamlining some of our land use data collection processes and lining that up with the region and also the state and trying to sync those up. So our data request procedure and asks to the local planners and public works staffs aren't so large and onerous. So trying to streamline some of that. Dan has been leading the review of proposals for the countywide active transportation plan. So interviews are happening later this week, and then there should be a contract back to you in April for selection for that project. So happy to see that proceeding. The Vision Zero Advisory Committee met in February to work on implementation of the Vision Zero action plan and also discuss and coordinate on traffic safety. So there are a lot of good discussions that happen in that group about different implementation measures on improving safety. Safe Routes to School program is very active. You can read about that in the report, including things like training programs, bike repair. There's a bike repair van, idle free and park and walk to school programs. So a whole host of activities that are being led by the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And then in February, the TDA 3 and TFCA call for projects were released. So those are out right now. So the planning team's here to answer any questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions as well if there are any.
Great. Any questions? Director Harvey.
Yes, I noticed in there that you are going to be submitting another request for proposals for the bike share. Do you have a general time frame on that? Only because we have some folks that are trying to have us go out on our own. And I said, well, I believe that you guys are doing that. I don't think we should go out and do that if it's within the realm.
And is our expert on.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so we are working on that and are aiming to get it out toward the end of this month. MTC is the funder for the grant program, and they're reviewing it right now. We have a call with them later this week to tie up some loose ends and figure out what actions we need moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
In our projects and programs update, let's bring up James.
All right, for the projects and programming activities report, I'm happy to talk about any of the items. I'll just focus on one project and one of the programming events that are occurring. The project would be 116-121, the roundabout over in Sonoma. There'll be an action later this month by the CTC that'll allocate all of the funds for the construction of that project. Caltrans will put it out to bid at the end of April, and we'll know sometime this summer who our contractor is going to be to actually break ground and start working on that project. On the programming side of things, I'll pick Regional Measure 3. So Regional Measure 3 was SB 595 back in 2018 that had gone through extensive legal challenges, has now been resolved. It's a $4.5 billion program for the entire 9 Bay Area counties. There's significant investment in the North Bay and Sonoma County with the Bay Trail, North Bay transit access improvements, smart extension Windsor to Healdsburg, the US 101 Maroon Sonoma Narrows, as well as State Route 37. And staff will be working with MTC and this board to advance those projects or those programs within our grid. So with that, I can staff here to answer any questions you have on the projects and programming.
Looking around, Director Love.
Just humorous, but through comment that when you put the roundabout at 116, 121, make sure there's a pop-up sign that says flooded and directs them up and out. Because you haven't been able to turn like that area for a while. That's the typical flooding.
Any other questions, comments from the board? All right, thanks, James. Let's go to public comment. I don't know that we have anybody in the room who wants to provide comment. Let's look to Zoom. Okay, so our last item is announcements from the board. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
I'll go ahead and just share. I think most of you have heard on March 2nd, we had a ribbon cutting ceremony for our roundabout, and it was really well attended. It was a really nice event, and nice to see everyone who was involved with that out there that night. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I think on that happy note, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.